you're only as strong as your links, and it's so tough because that involves vulnerability. There's so many elements to a healthy community that's like pushing you to go forward, because you'll go further with other people than you will by yourselves.
And I just want to pick your brain about discipleship.
Ooh.
Okay, so let me start the conversation with this question. How important is mentorship in combat sports, and how has it shaped your journey as an athlete?
Oh, wow. Good question. I think what wise counsel ensures victory. The more people you have in your corner, usually the better you are. What did we say the other day? I think it was like the fighter is the product of the investments of others.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this a lot, of like how sometimes the most passionate athletes are the ones without a team or without a mentor, and what we have seen traditionally, and just the pattern of what we've seen through our chaplaincy ministry is that fighter is usually not on the winning side most of the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they're going against somebody else who has a corner or has had depth of training,
Mm-hmm.
And so mentorship and coaching is unbelievably important. And it's important that as a fighter, even as a fighter gets better, that they don't lose that heart of mentorship as the mentoree, because as you get better, you're like, it's easy to forget who got you there.
Sure.
And so I think we could see that sometimes too, because as a fighter gets better and better, sometimes they're like, oh, I don't need you anymore, coach, or this coach. And, and sometimes there's of course, a valid argument to, as you get better, sometimes you need a better coach,
Okay.
So there are moments where transitions need to happen, and but you never really forget who brought you to that first part. Or, there's different seasons in a fighter where you fight for different, organizations and stuff and kind of work your way up the ladder. But and especially in my case, I've from a young age really understood the importance of mentorship, and that was put into my training because I started when I was 3. So I've always kind of known a instructor or sensei back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's been times in my life where I can relate to that fighter that pushed mentors away, and that was more in the realm of ministry. Not so much the combat sports, but I really experienced what that's like when you push people away and think that you're okay.
Yeah.
And then you end up, the ground below you gets a little bit hollow. And so mentors are there to keep you accountable. Mentors are there to point out things in your life that are wrong, and to point you down the path that's right. Not that they're God, of course, like I'm not, God is God, but he uses people and we need community. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of fighters might, neglect community in training partners, but also in mentors, man. Absolutely important.
Wow. That was a great answer. So I want to look at the parallels now between the physicality of combat sports and mentorship, but also the spiritual side of discipleship, because I think they kind of go hand in hand.
Sure.
So in what ways do you see similarities between being mentored in combat sports and being discipled in Christianity?
Oh, right on. Yeah. There's so many areas that we're ignorant to, in life, because sometimes we do get gloomy on ourselves, right? But I do think typically we see ourselves better than we are, or are so comfortable with areas in our lives that are easy to get complacent in, and ignore. And they can actually be areas of prevention holding us back from our potential. And so if we're isolated, there are very few people that are self-starters, and, the Goggins is out there, and, like that can really stick to a diet by themselves, or stick to a regiment, or stay in spiritual disciplines, and, like just stay on track, and not only on track, but better, and then better, and then better. And like, with every revelation that you have of truth, whether that be on the mats. So what I'm saying is, like, say you learn a technique or a combination, or your coach is trying to take you, because again, like a coach's job is to take you from A to B.
Sure.
And then B to C, and then, like continue down the path. And then as you get to Z, then it's like, okay, A1, and then, I mean, there's like so much more to learn. And so your coach or instructor or mentor or therapist or anybody that's involved in your life that's trying to help you is trying to take you from where you are and show you how you can get from where you are to where you can be, and that's you fulfilling your potential and things. And so when you're on your own and you're isolated or neglecting investment of other people, there tends to be a complacency and a deterioration of our path because there's nobody behind you kind of poking you with a stick or giving you that voice of encouragement or keeping the vision alive in your mind.
Yeah.
So like, say, for example, you have your New Year's resolution, and we write it down, but nobody ever sees the notebook that you wrote it down in, by Thanksgiving, that would have been a good one. But by February, what am I looking for? Valentine's Day,
Sure.
You're like, what New Year's resolution? So I think it comes back to this community, the ingredients of success, especially on the mats, but also in our life with God and our relationship with God. Success meaning, health, just healthy.
Yeah.
I think the ingredients are there's always an element of investment of other people. And we see it in the fight game, but also, as you just are kind of asking here, like with our walk with God, you're only as strong as your links, and it's so tough because that involves vulnerability. There's so many elements to a healthy community that's like pushing you to go forward, because you'll go further with other people than you will by yourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's so key on the mats and off the mats, man.
Wow. That's really good. How would a mentor or a disciple maker guide their mentee or disciple?
The word I think of is influence. We all have influence, right? Like I see that with you, especially like on a Sunday morning, and I think maybe you could relate to this with worship, as a worship leader and, facilitator or whatever word you want to throw in there.
Mm-hmm.
Is you have a lot of influence behind the mic and in your tone and body language, but also in the spiritual influence in your own life. Because like as a pastor, as a preacher, as a worship leader, like the heart of the minister always comes through, and that's influence, and we are influencers regardless of whether we're in the shoes of a discipler or mentee,
Yeah.
But you have influence regardless. And I think we've talked about how fighters especially have influence regardless if they want it or not.
That's true.
Because they're projected as, and especially by the, like what have we said before? Like, they're projected as like the man,
Sure.
Is like, this is it, they're the guy, and everybody should aspire to be them and so then that becomes the star status and all these things. And it's really tough. And we see that great fighters aren't always great people. And of course we're in a fallen world and people, we just make bad choices and whatever, but we see this from the UFC to the local one in Deer Lodge yesterday,
Yeah.
there's good fighters, but not always good people. And so we all have influence, but sometimes we don't use it well. And I think a key part of being a good disciple maker, a good influencer, a good mentee is integrity. You don't have to act like you know everything, but and everybody doesn't need to know every detail of your life. But I think we've defined integrity before as like, what people do know about me matches who I actually am.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key factor. And I think a big verse that I like is, it's either Psalm 78, 72, or it's Psalm 72, verse 78. I don't know. It's one of those. But it talks about David leading with integrity and competence. And I love that. And that's a verse I try to keep alive in my heart but leading through integrity, like, okay, there's no wrong that can be said against me that stands, like there's nothing, like I'm totally, living the life and walking the walk.
Yeah.
And then with competence, it's like, okay, but I'm not just staying there. And this where it comes back to somebody's working on me and discipling me. And, I'm doing my part in being competent, meaning like that I'm growing in skill and being able to do that. So I think that verse is really a good key heart for any mentoree or disciple maker.
Wow. Have you ever thought about being in politics?
No.
You're just so good at answering questions.
No, man, I don't know what I'm talking about half the time.
So episode 40, do you remember that one? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, no.
Okay.
It's in the past. That was probably the greatest episode we've ever done, episode 40.
So we talked about how someone would mentor or disciple another person. Can you share an example of how this guidance has impacted you? Maybe both in sports and in faith, or one or the other?
I think of our academy, teaching the kids, and I oversee our kids' program. That's kind of my main thing. But, as simple as like, I can't teach something I don't do.
Yeah.
And I can only take the kids so far as I can't take them somewhere that I'm not. I can't expect them to do techniques or understand something that I don't understand, you know. Not that it's all on my shoulders, but at the same point, I have to teach as if it is all on my shoulders. So it's important that, again, that I'm not expecting something from someone that I'm not doing myself.
Sure.
So I think that is another avenue that we could, talk about with just to being a good disciple maker and living in integrity. But, as examples go, there's a handful of people, there's always people influencing you, but then there's some people that are like in a deeper circle and a closer circle. And, and then there should always be a handful of people that, that you could call, like, okay, you should have your call friends, like, okay, guys, I'm having a really tough time and I just need to let this off my shoulders or talk to the boys or whatever. And then, so like there's a really important part of letting people get close.
Yeah.
And if you've been hurt by the church or have a grudge against someone, it's really hard to let people close.
Yeah.
And abuse or there's always valid reasons to keep people at an arm's length. But if I have a healthy relationship with God, meaning like I'm working through things and we're all working through things, but it gives me the chance to risk trusting, and that's because I'm relying on God, but I'm like, okay, God, who in my life, or who should I ask, or who should I reach out to try to, build a relationship with? And so there's part of me seeking that out as a mentoree, be like, hey, I'm just looking to talk with somebody about whatever, maybe I want to understand the Bible, or maybe I want to talk about the divorce or how to be a good dad or whatever, finances. And so your local church, a healthy local church, is a good place to start for that. But now in outside of a ministry church world, bringing the church to the people, just being a Christian out there, with reaching out to people to be like, hey, do you want to get a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
Or, and which just sounds like a scary step for a lot of people, because it's like, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing, And so in my experience with things, it's like, okay, I know how I love God and I want to love people and just help point people to him, and so that there can be casual ways to do that, but relationships are what's important. And that's what I've experienced with the church, is just be a good friend, and you don't have to shove Jesus at people or whatever, but like a great way to kind of get this ball rolling with just being a discipler is just buy Bibles for people.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, do you have a Bible? And then they sell them at Walmart, they sell them everywhere for, $12 or whatever. But it's, that's a great way to just be a friend, but then challenge yourself and be like, hey, do you want to read it with me?
Yeah.
Or like, do you want to read it together? Or like, let's read Mark 1-3 and then talk about it next week over a cup of coffee. What do you learn? What did I?
What a simple way to start
You know.
that discipleship with someone,
Right.
without the heaviness of being like, God has bestowed upon me to disciple you.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, with and I do feel not to ramble on this point, but I do feel a key part of this is God's heart in you, because that gives you a lot of courage to okay, what if I say something wrong? What if I do something, and of course that's a healthy part of that, but don't let it keep you from trying. Because like Paul said to Timothy at the end of the second book there, he says something like, go on and on, whatever, and work at telling other people the good news. You got to work at it. You got to just start somewhere, suck at it till you don't.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like it can be as complicated as you want it to be or as simple as you want it to be.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have all the answers. So if you're meeting with somebody like, what does this mean? Or, they might have a question that doesn't even relate to Mark 1-3, but like, I don't know, let's look it up, or I don't know, like you could kind of start anywhere. But I think a huge part of it though is God's heart in you, which is weeping for lost people. And I've been challenged with this just recently reading of like, when's the last time you cried for lost people? When's the last time you wept for missions or the lack of workers, or, the state of the church, or, the inclusion of so many things that are against the core of the truth of the Bible that are just seeping into the, our world. And, so I think the heart of discipleship is first and foremost our relationship with God, And so I found in the grand scheme of things, when I'm connected to God and have his heart, discipleship and mentoring others flows a little bit more naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. The Father's heart, for sure.
Right.
Is there anyone you want to name drop?
Name drop.
Yeah.
That's like invested into me, or
Yeah.
yeah. There's of course, Pastor Randy, our local pastor, he's put a lot of time into me and to you in a lot of ways as well, with being employees, of course, but there's been a lot that I've learned from him, so like that mentor relationship has been a lot more, I would say, church logistics.
Yeah.
A lot more mentorship and professionalism within the church doors. And a lot of safeguards to live above reproach and stay within integrity in a lot of different ways. So Randy does a really, really good job of that. Our presbyter, so like our state is broken up into, we have our district leader, and then within there's different sections within Montana. Each one of those has a presbyter who's like a representative or pastor of that area of churches who have pastors, and the kind of this hierarchy. But our presbyter, who I've known for quite a while anyways, outside of the presbytery window, Greg Ledgerwood, he's a great man. That's I still meet with him quite frequently. It's been a minute now, but we were meeting like every other month and just catching up on life. I would ask him some ministry questions. He'd ask me some hard questions, challenge me to some things. And I think that's a big, good relationship there, because it's not just me dumping like, oh, here's everything that's going on, Greg.
Like therapy.
It's not, yeah. And if you need that, you need that.
Yeah.
But in terms of like somebody challenging you in spiritual truths, I think that's a big key part of discipleship, is like, okay, you go to God, here's something for you to think about, get over yourself, who's willing to tell you a little bit of the hard truths.
Yeah.
And for them to be able to do that, you have to let them in. You have to have a relationship. And so again, don't keep people at arm's length, because some of us really fear letting somebody in. Some of us fear a voice of reason sometimes. And it takes time, so a lot of us don't want to spend the time, don't want to go for it, don't want to let somebody in. And how can we expect to be a disciple maker if we're not being discipled ourselves too? So there's a lot of different ways, but those are a couple of name drops on my end. But do you have a couple people or someone in your life that's always been a mentor?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say Joe Epley.
Oh, nice.
Was that person for me when I was young. We had a lot of one-on-one mentorship areas. And like you said, it all started with the relationship first, because you can only let someone can only pour into you as much as you let them in. So he was that person for me. And then I would say Matthew Miller. He was a guy in Billings that really helped me understand guitar in a different way, showed me a side of spirituality that I hadn't thought about before, because I had a lot of like religious actions and thoughts, but I lacked a lot of the relationship side of Christianity.
Okay.
And he really showed me how to be open to that and not be so like structured in a way where I'm missing out on Jesus in a whole new world.
Bowing your head at the right time.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I had one other person, my first coach or instructor or sensei, whatever, when I was a young boy, George Orcutt, he really, he was the right person at the right time for a long season.
Yeah.
And that was really, he wasn't really a religious man.
Sure.
But he really fostered so many characteristics within me that have carried over into really who I am today in a lot of ways. So I really give him a lot of credit for a lot of things, and so God can use anything, and help sharpening you. But that was an important person in my life too.
That's cool. Okay. Just a couple more questions before we wrap up. What are some common challenges that you face in mentorship in combat sports and maybe even Christian discipleship?
That I have faced personally is the little bit of nasty you got to have.
Sure.
Okay, so what I mean is in coaching someone or in the church, they're very similar this way. You get involved with God. You're like, wow, I've just experienced, new life and this is such a high. This is like the best thing that ever happened to me. And they're right. Okay. Sometimes somebody that steps foot in jujitsu class or, whatever, like it's almost the same similar heart of like, this is awesome. I love jujitsu. I love choking someone. I love getting choked. This is great. Like, and it can be such a joy. And so in my mind, it's like this little graph, of like an up. And so things are going up, I'm involved in the church. I love worship. There's all these other people love God too. This is crazy. Right. And we get kind of like this high, and I'm on the mats, other people training. There's a schedule all week. I got a gi, and all this joy that can happen. And then that kind of goes away when we have the realities of just the day to day, and that can happen sometimes for people. That happens a little quicker, sometimes a little bit more down the road. And we kind of plateau on that up the graph, so things kind of flatten out a little bit. And then we start to see how difficult jujitsu is. And we start to compare a little bit more, or wish we were along a little bit further than we were. And we wish we, okay, things aren't making sense now a little bit with how my life's still pretty tough, but God's still my God, and we could kind of start to be a little bit less fiery for God. And, things can start to kind of actually go down a little bit, not necessarily in our intimacy with God, but we could start to kind of come off the mountain back to the valley a little bit. So in our jiu-jitsu journey in combat sports, or with our relationship with God, that's where you gotta have that little bit of determination of reality, because in reality, because it's not always going to be a joyous, happy day at church, or your Bible time's not going to be, always what you want it to be sometimes, because it's important that we have that little bit of nasty, meaning like, okay, I'm going to continue to pursue God because He's worthy of me, and so it's important that in our early walk with God that we understand the core truths of, okay, God's not just here to make me happy, and I think it's important that churches are communicating these things all the time, like it's okay. It's about a relationship. It's about growing in purpose and being a light in a dark world. And, all the things of like, okay, life still might be tough. And we preach on this in Fight Church. And that's why a lot of ways why we created Fight Church is to be a little bit more intentional about preaching, like, okay, life still might suck. The storms are still there, but God is the same.
Yeah.
And he loves you and he's for you and he can be trusted. And we learn things through the storm, and the storm functions as a way of glorifying him and all these things of like just life. And so as a mentoree or a discipler or a coach, I find a lot of the difficulties come when reality sets in. You know, you've had your free week trial and now you're in the grind of it. And a lot of people quit in jujitsu. And sometimes this is about the blue belt area in jujitsu, is they get their blue belt, there's a little bit of an accomplishment, and they could end on a high note when they were really just hoping to last till they got their blue. Or, you know, you stick it out, and we see a lot of people that like get a little bit more seasoned that understand that jujitsu is not always a high, but it's in a lot of ways resembles life because it's tough and it's gritty, you know, and in the same way our walk with God is too. And we can't live on an illusion that it's always going to be a balloon birthday party. And that's when it gets tough. And so as a mentoree, it's important that that's communicated. And a lot of people just drop off that. What if they came to church one more time?
Yeah.
What if they would have just come one more time? You know, what if they would have come to one more class? What if they would have just invested in a Bible study one more time?
Sure.
And that could have been the turning point. And so as a mentoree, that's really, really hard because you're investing in these people, and some people just drop off, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's a struggle because you can't be emotionally attached to the point of where your identity is dependent upon those that you're mentoring or coaching. Because you could get really weird and manipulative and like, you know, my self-worth is dependent upon all the people that I'm teaching, you know, and when people aren't showing up, the coach can just be passive aggressive,
Sure,
and a little manipulative and like give stripes or belts away too soon.
Oh, sure.
To keep somebody around when they're getting promoted when they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Or keep them as a paying customer. You know, oh, I'm going to give you another stripe. Oh, you coming by tomorrow? It's stripe day. Yeah, you know, we're giving out sprinkles tomorrow. You know, and so in the spiritual world, we could do that.
Yeah.
You know, not in the same way, but like, I feel like sometimes churches excuse party time for community when it's really about keeping people entertained. There's sometimes I feel like that line can get a little weird. But of course, like, hey, we want to have fun together. Yeah. You know, but I feel like sometimes those can be a little emphasized more than feeding sheep, you know, of some hard truth. So
that's good. You know, earlier you talked about like the stick in the back of someone. I just had this image in my mind. You know how Paul talks about like the thorn in his flesh.
Oh, sure.
I wonder if that's kind of like on the same thing. Because,
right.
He asked God to take it away, and God told him, no, I'm not going to take it away. And it kind of like egged him on and pushed him on.
True.
In a different way. And I wonder if that's kind of a part of mentorship or coaching, is you're kind of that nasty in someone.
Dude, that's
with
true.
The stick.
Yeah, poking and prodding them.
You know.
Yeah.
Come on, you can do one more push-up.
Exactly. Exactly.
Do two more.
Lord, take it away, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, like, thinking about mentorship, one of the biggest challenges I see is that it costs time.
Right.
And time is the currency that is most valuable in life. And we can be so selfish with it and want to hoard it.
Right.
But you have to give it up. And sometimes you spend all this time with someone, mentoring them, and it's like all for nothing.
Yeah.
And you just wasted all of this time with no, you know, results that you wanted. But other times it's an investment. Yeah. You put that little bit of time into the savings account and you're getting a little bit of return, but maybe you put a lot of this time into a CD account and all of a sudden you have $1 million. You know, who knows? It's an investment.
And you never know. You never know, you know, because you can't like manipulate results either.
Yeah.
in someone. And it's tough though, because you want the best for them and you want to see them succeed. And it's really pure motives don't always result in fruit of your labor.
Yeah.
And that's just a tough pill to swallow as a missionary, as a tooler of the ground. Tiller of the ground. What's the term there?
I hope not tooler, because that sounds really mean.
Till the ground. Because again, we might plant the seed.
Yeah.
We might water the seed, but God decides when it grows.
Exactly.
And a seed might have been planted years ago. They fell apart, and you're like, wow, I even forgot they existed.
Yeah.
And but God still sees them.
Absolutely.
So we have to trust God in that,
Yeah.
Even though it's can be a killer.
Yeah.
Well,
I just want to kind of wrap everything up with this simple question. What does the Bible say about the similarities between mentorship and coaching in the combat sports realm and discipleship in the Christian standpoint? And first and foremost, I just want to say that Jesus is the ultimate example of discipleship.
Right.
Matthew 4:19 says, "And he said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men.'" Because Jesus calls his disciples to follow him and learn from him and eventually lead others.
Yeah, right.
Secondly, the Bible says this a really popular verse, a verse used a lot in the Christian world, one that you should really have equipped in your tool belt, memorized, is Matthew 28:19 and 20. And it says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age." And this passage really emphasizes the responsibility of Christians to make disciples by teaching others what they have learned from Christ. And I think that's a really key point, because let's look at it in the combat sports world. You've learned all of this really cool stuff about jiu-jitsu, for example. You've learned the buggy choke. You even implemented it 2 times in the same place.
Right.
And you've learned all of these cool things, and you have all these tools on your belt. And but then what's it all for if you're not able to utilize that in someone else and pour into someone else?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, and this might be a little depressing or distraught, but at the end of the day, there's 2 numbers and a dash on your gravestone, and it doesn't. The numbers on the end don't matter. It's what you did in the dash. So
yeah, that's good.
You're not gonna take all of the buggy chokes and cross chokes into the afterlife. You need to be passing that stuff on to other people.
True. Yeah, like knowledge isn't meant to be hoarded and held tight, but shared.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good.
So then lastly, in wrapping up about what does the Bible say, I love to look at the relationship between Paul and Timothy, and you even touched on it earlier as well. And Paul says this in 2 Timothy 2:2, "What you've heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also."
Wow.
And so Paul's saying, teach so that those can teach, so that those can teach.
Yeah.
And Paul instructs Timothy to pass on what he's learned to reliable people who can then teach others, creating a chain of discipleship. And again, you talked about the strength in our chains, in those links, and it all just correlates so well.
It really does. It's how the church works. It's how it works.
Yeah, and it's how it has to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I just want to encourage you as our listener today, that if you don't have someone in your life that is discipling you or mentoring you, I'd encourage you to seek one out. Try to find a healthy person, and sometimes you think the right person discipling you is there and it doesn't work out, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There's other people out there too. So don't be afraid to like Zach said, let someone in more than arm's length. Don't be afraid to do that. And I want to encourage you to seek out the one true discipler and the one true coach and mentor today, who's Jesus. And he's the ultimate discipleship choice. And submitting to him is challenging, but it's so rewarding. And I feel like sometimes the Holy Spirit can be that person with the stick in our back, egging us on.
That's right. Yeah. And should be.
Maybe you shouldn't have done that. Maybe you should have done 5 more push-ups. Sometimes the Holy Spirit talks to us like that. But in the end, it's the best decision you'll ever make. It might be challenging, hard, but it's so rewarding. So yeah, I would encourage you, find that mentor. Maybe it's someone in your local church. Maybe it's a Christian in your local gym.
Right.
And just start that conversation with them, and begin to ask hard questions and let them ask you hard questions.
Right. That goes both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Right on. Yeah. And so, thanks for putting that together, Dakota. Really good job. Absolutely. It was really good stuff. And
Thank you.
As we end every episode,
Yeah.
Our walkout song of the month.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to Crosschoke. It was a blast creating this episode, and we hope you enjoyed listening. Submit any fun questions, inquisitive comments, serious requests, or hilarious stories to tflministries.com/podcast. Feel free to follow Zach at Ando Butte and myself at South for a Day. Have an amazing day and join us next time on Crosschoke.